the goal, of course, is, hey, how do we find this balance, walk this middle path, right, between the wonders of technology, but also not allowing it to kind of control us. We want to be the ones in control who can hit that power button if we want to.
Welcome to the Healthy Screen Habits Podcast. I'm Hillary Wilkinson. Whether you're starting your parenting journey with a newborn or looking to connect with your teen on technology, let's learn some new healthy screen habits together. My guest today is a psychotherapist based in the San Francisco Bay Area. He works mainly with adolescents and young adults and specializes in the treatment of tech-related behavioral addictions. These include both gaming and social media. He played a pivotal role in co-founding California's first in-network outpatient program dedicated to addressing technology-related addictions in adolescents. I have so many questions. I'm so glad you are here to chat with us. Welcome to Healthy Screen Habits, Alex Basche.
Thank you so much, Hillary. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
For sure. So, Alex, not only are you an expert in the field of tech related behavioral addictions, you also work in Menlo Park. So, for those listeners who are not in California, you may not realize that Menlo Park is basically the heart of Silicon Valley. Menlo Park is the home to headquarters of Google, Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and on their city profile homepage, list themselves as the capital of venture capital. It's funny because
Oh,
yeah, I know. It's funny because what we hear again and again, Alex, is that the execs of Silicon Valley don't let their kids have tech, and yet you have enough of a clientele that you are based there. So I'm like, so what is that like?
that's funny. Yeah, that's a first for me. That was something I wasn't aware of because you wouldn't know it, at least from what I think many of us in the field have seen. Because it's
Wouldn't know
it's
what?
hard.
Wouldn't know
Well,
which part.
you wouldn't know that they were not letting their kids have tech because truly, I mean, also having grown up in this area, my dad's worked in tech my entire life as well. So it's just something that I've kind of just been steeped in for most of my life, and all the major kind of tech industry founders and pioneers, investors, etc. They get into this. Obviously, it's lucrative, but also there's a lot of stock, so to speak, that's placed in innovation and on ingenuity and really being the person who moves fast and break things. And so there's the cutting edge tech is something that often finds its way back home. They bring it back from the office. Hey, you should play with this new thing that we just got. So these are also kids that are getting introduced often to technology before it's even hit the market or sometimes is even in testing. So that they're often very savvy. And one of the challenges that I often encounter with people that work in tech and whose kids or teens or young adults are seeing me is that there's this kind of dichotomy where, these people have spent their entire career, again, just kind of living in the wonders of technology and ingenuity and innovation, and yet their own children, right, of course, are struggling with the dark side of this innovation and the dark side of this technology. And so I find often that part of treatment involves also kind of like helping parents come to terms with that, helping them sort of
Mm.
process and and find, okay, maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe it's not all bad, but maybe it's not all good, right? Like, there's that saying that Google had, which is don't be evil. And so the goal, of course, is, hey, how do we find this balance, walk this middle path, right, between the wonders of technology, but also not allowing it to kind of control us. We want to be the ones in control who can hit that power button if we want to.
Yeah, I feel like that's what we're all struggling with, right? I mean,
Yeah,
because
truly.
we just struggle with being tech intentional.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
it's like we love technology, but we were having a tricky time getting it to stay in its lane and not impinge upon our human relationships. So I think we're getting better at it. I do. I don't know. Maybe I'm, Pollyanna, but I I feel like as awareness builds and as I've worked with more and more parents, I feel like we're getting much better with maintaining intentionality.
Truly. Yeah, it's definitely, I think the pandemic was a big wake-up call for a lot of us. And there was a time where it was very black or white. It was, it's gaming is evil. It's going to take over your life, or social media is going to destroy your self-esteem. And and then on the other side, it's like, no, this is like how I express myself or how I connect with my friends. Like you just don't get it.
Right.
So starting to see that also kind of awakening happen with parents too, that oh, there's a way to do this that is, safe, that's sane, that's age appropriate, and that also doesn't equate, like hating the player and hating the game. So that's something that I often talk with parents about, which is that, hey, if you just kind of walk around the house demonizing the games that your kid's playing, this is wrapped up in their identity. So you're also kind of right in turn hating the player, and
Right.
obviously that's not the message you want to send to your kids, of course. So finding
Mhm.
a way to have that balance is of course very key. But it's also hard, right? It's hard to be a teenager these days, and I think it's something that sometimes is claimed with every generation that oh, it's so hard these days. But I think it's
Right.
safe to say, being Gen Z and being such digital natives, it can be a real struggle to think of it in terms of finding that moderation. And particularly, in the Bay Area, right, with these teens who grow up seeing their parents wildly successful, right? Like just at the forefront of this huge, bajillion-dollar industry, to not model their idea of success on, oh, if I get X grades, that means that I will have Y outcome. And so anything else I do, as long as I get the numbers that or the letters that say I know what I know, is okay. So I can stay up all night gaming and then waltz into school, get an A on this test, and go home and binge on it all over again. And that's okay. So learning
Right.
that, the definition of success also is socio-emotional growth and emotional intelligence and in-person social connection.
So we almost need to kind of widen and deepen the definition of success as we approach our kids, and show them
Yeah.
models of well-rounded, loving, caring individuals. It's not just numbers based, whether that be income or likes or scores or etc.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that there's just so much pressure. And I know it's not just here in the Bay Area, just in talking to other colleagues across the country, really internationally, there's
Mm-hmm.
just so much more of this sort of scarcity mentality, right? It's harder to get into college. It's even harder to get into, what people think of as, oh, this is the top school. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this sort of survivalist mentality of, I gotta just like scrape and fight and get every last point, every last accolade. And it's, I think, honestly, part of why we're seeing such high rates of mental health disorders developing and such high rates of depression and suicidality and substance use among this
Yeah.
latest generation. So,
Yeah.
it's like who between that and the environment and everything else going on in the world, who wouldn't want to escape into a digital realm?
Right. And a lot of times I feel like what we see is that when we're talking with kids, like tech is a little bit of like gasoline on a fire of a pre existing concern,
Yes.
like it's an accelerant of angst. My question to you as a mental health professional is like what role do co-occurring conditions play with tech related behavioral addictions? Do you see a correlation?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I think that the classic example has been social phobia, or what we used to call social anxiety. Uh,
Mm.
that's really in that top five of most prevalent co-occurring disorders. And again, someone who, for example, has social anxiety, or even is on the autism spectrum, the idea of being able to form lasting social connections online where you're not having to read people's, nonverbal cues, you're not having to interact on a three-dimensional level, in which case, like, the playing field doesn't feel as level.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually quite helpful. And so it's, again, going back to that idea of balance, there's plenty of ways that some of these folks who are so into, gaming, social media, etc., are really getting their needs met. We think about like what some of the motivating factors are. Being able to develop like a community and connection is really invaluable. So it's, I think, also important to recognize that some of these folks who do have some of these co-occurring disorders, they are actually finding really clever and wonderful ways of getting those needs met, um, and that the motivation is actually quite benign. It's not a it's not always just a desire to numb or to escape or avoid. And so
Right.
I think anxiety is a big one. ADHD is really the most prevalent. That's one we see a lot. And again, when it's just the way that someone's brain is wired, it's very easy to get stuck in that sort of shame spiral of you're not spending enough time doing your homework. All you want to do is game. What's wrong with you? They use the A word, you're addicted. And really it's like, hey, this is just how their brain's wired. So why are we levying all this shame on the teenager? Because again, being a teen is hard enough. Maybe there's a way to find that balance that is more positive, more strength based. As you said, it's just kind of pouring fuel on the fire.
You mentioned finding these communities online, which I 100% understand can be completely beneficial, and finding people you connect with and all of that. Um, do you find that the online communities are as strong? Do people get the same amount of emotional feedback is from in-person relationships versus their online communities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, there's definitely been some research that shows, as we might expect, certainly it's not the same, and it wouldn't be fair, I think, to equate those two. I
Mm,
usually like to think of it more as something that's supplemental, that like, hey, this person has found that they've now been able to have these sorts of social connections they hadn't had before, or they struggled to form. And so in some ways it's kind of like the training wheels of creating social connection and community.
I've never
But
even thought of it that way. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
so it's like, hey, so it's not that it's a bad thing. We all need training wheels, right? Where everyone starts, from that same place, but at some point they got to come off. And it doesn't mean you need to throw those relationships away or discount them, but it does mean that, okay, let's take it to the next level. And one of the ways that I've been trying to help some people do that is getting them into tabletop gaming. So like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Settlers of
Totally. Like we
Catan.
have like game rooms, I think they're called, like in the community, where they
Yeah,
have just like a whole wall of various board games, or and like you're talking about, like what you're talking. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no,
I
no, please.
I the same communities that I see like drawn towards those Dungeons and Dragons are a lot of the kids that I see also, whom just from the outside, I would put them in the heavy gamer category. you
Yeah,
know but I think that's,
absolutely.
yeah, I love how that is a very real life um ease into something. So if you have a child who is, finding their only connections to be online gaming or within that community, you can seek to forge other relationships by maybe getting them into a local gaming league of tabletop gaming.
Definitely, and even taking it a step further, there's now accreditations you can get in what's called a therapeutic dungeon master. Basically, like in a game like Dungeons and Dragons, which of course is the OG in tabletop, there's one person who is kind of the one that is the world builder,
Right.
and they're the ones that kind of guide everyone through, and that's the GM or the dungeon master. So as a therapist, you can get an accreditation where you're trained in how to really utilize that sort of world and those game mechanics to create kind of like not kind of, to create a therapeutic environment and to help
Like a
people practice.
social group? Would it be akin to a social group or
Yeah, but there's more of a clinical layer to it. And so
okay.
it's okay, so here are these people, right? For example, like with social anxiety, we're gonna work on developing pro-social communication skills, and I'm gonna integrate that into this round of, gameplay or this scenario
That's
that we're playing together.
brilliant. Yeah,
Truly.
I
Yeah,
love that.
it's fantastic.
Yeah. So next we're going to talk about game transfer phenomena, but first we have to take a break. We love what we do, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the generous donations provided by our listeners and followers. We want to extend special thanks to the Doctors Petty for their unwavering support of the podcast and organization. If you'd like to make a difference and contribute to the education and empowerment of families building their healthiest screen habits, please go to healthyscreenhabits.org, find the Take Action tab, and scroll down and click the donate button. 100% of your donation will be used to spread awareness and bring families the tools they need to develop healthy screen habits. I'm speaking with Alex Basche, a licensed marriage and family therapist and CMAT candidate who specializes in the treatment of tech related behavioral addictions. So, Alex, I have to ask, what is CMAT? I don't
Oh,
know.
so so basically there's different levels of certification for behavioral addictions. So there's a
Mm,
CSAT, which is like a certified sex addiction therapist. And right now
mm.
what I'm pursuing is a CMAT, which is like multiple addictions. And I'm
Oh, okay.
trying to
Gotcha.
just see how many different acronyms I can collect because honestly, it was kind of hard finding accreditations and certifications for behavioral addictions because with substance use disorders, there's a ton, and
Mm,
I'd gotten that when I was in Oregon, a CADC, a certified alcohol and drug counselor. But of course, it doesn't transfer to California, so just playing with that bureaucracy a little bit, certainly.
gotcha. Okay, so thank you for clearing that up.
Of
All
course,
right.
of course.
So, one of your areas is of expertise is game transfer phenomena, which is also known as GTP. I only became aware of GTP after reading Glow Kids. And
Yeah.
can you define what is game transfer phenomena and like how does it impact people's functioning and like just give us the whole lowdown?
Yeah, so GTP is basically this neurological phenomena that happens. It's based on like sensory perceptions, or behavior changes, or mental process changes, which happens as a result of like a digital trigger stimulation. So what that often can look like is like an auditory hallucination. So if we see this in some ways actually happen with nurses a lot, where they're listening to the beeping of a machine, like a heart rate monitor, and then they go home and they can still hear the beeping, even though obviously, right, they're nowhere near the monitor. For gamers, often it's, they're every time they attack in their game, it plays like a certain music, and then when they turn the game off, they get into bed, they close their eyes, they can hear the music faintly playing. And so it's this interesting phenomena that isn't really well understood. It's been happening pretty much since the advent of really the digital life that we know. Even used to be called the Tetris effect.
Yeah, that was my intro to it. Can you explain
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So it was originally called that because people that were playing Tetris were having this sort of phenomena, and it was really just considered as something that was just like, oh yeah, that just happens because you're playing the game. And so it was really thought at first to have just been localized really to that one population, and thus wasn't really well researched or studied. I had stumbled upon it because I was really curious about the effects of, because I used to do a lot of work with substance abuse, of post-hallucinogen perception disorder, and which is also known as like people that have taken like a lot of hard drugs, like hallucinogen, and then they have flashbacks or other phenomena, uh, even though the substance is no longer in their system. And so I was pointed towards this wonderful, brilliant professor, Angelica Ortiz de Cortari, and she is kind of I wouldn't say the founder, but she's really the world expert on GTP. And so we've been coordinating across the oceans because she's based in Europe the past couple of years on a number of research projects.
Okay. So how I understand that it is so with the Tetris effect, people would continue in their periphery to see like the falling blocks.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know isn't familiar with Tetris, Tetris was a very early stage video game in which you lined up blocks to come and, create complete horizontal lines at which it would blink or whatever, and you'd collect your points, and that row would evaporate, and you'd go about trying to puzzle piece these together. So, in my understanding, people would continue to kind of see these falling blocks on like out of the sides of their eyes. So you've talked,
Hmm.
and then you've talked about the auditory hallucinations. Like, how I don't I guess what I'm asking is like how does it impact people's
Yeah.
day-to-day life? Like I'm like, so, many's the day I've walked around, singing, some earworm or another, So
Yes,
I'm just like,
exactly.
how is it different? Why should we care is what I'm
Yes,
asking.
that is
That's not.
often the question. Truly, right? Because it's like, oh, that's interesting, that's neat. Why do I care?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the answer is, and this is something that we've been working a lot on recently, is, the clinical application is something that I think I can best summarize just with a short anecdote. And I was working with one teenager who had been in and out, unfortunately, of the hospital, and they had found that they were being prescribed a number of antipsychotic medications. And the reason was because they were suspected of having schizophrenia or something similar. But it turned out it was there was something else going on. But the symptoms they were getting these medications for turned out to be game transfer phenomena. Now,
Oh,
the prescribing doctor, the hospital, no one had really heard of it, and no one had really made that connection because, of course, right, it's not a very well-known phenomena. But once I started meeting with them and presented, this hypothesis to the prescriber, they almost immediately leapt into action and started weeding them off. And a lot of their difficult behaviors went away. It turned out to be more of a situational thing, and they didn't need to be on all these, heavy, serious antipsychotic drugs. So
oh,
when we talk about, why should we care? It's because sometimes this can be misdiagnosed as, something such as, this case, right, schizophrenia or something like it. But also because if we can separate that out, then we can see, okay, well, some of these behaviors you're engaging in are probably because, okay, you're playing too much, but also it's maybe when you're playing. So if you're gaming late into the night and this is really disrupting your sleep and you're entering into what's called like having like a hypnagogic sort of state, which is that kind of dawn between sleep and wakefulness,
Mm,
and it's starting to really interrupt, right, the sleep process. Maybe we need to move when you're gaming back. So I've been really interested in looking at those sort of clinical applications. And really also it's kind of an indicator of, okay, for whatever reason, the 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 lines between reality and fantasy, right, in the digital world are getting a bit more blurred.
for sure.
And we need to investigate why that is. Is it something to do with your brain or when you're playing, how much, things like that?
How how can someone determine? I'm thinking if you're a parent who's concerned, or if you're someone yourself who is a gamer and concerned, how can someone determine if they have a bad habit versus a like full on gaming or tech addiction?
Yeah, thankfully, there's a lot of great skills and assessments that we use to help determine that. There's like for people that aren't struggling with gaming specifically, there's like the internet addiction test, um, the IAT. There's the internet gaming disorder test,
Mm,
the problematic online gaming questionnaire. There's a number of them that are pretty self-explanatory and are a lot of them are self-reporting. So you can even just go online and Google any of those names and it'll come up with a PDF. But
okay.
really, like when we're thinking about how much of this is an issue, we're looking at really the criteria, right? The definitions. So are we seeing changes in mood? Are we seeing symptoms of anxiety, anger, irritability that happen when you're not allowed to play? Is there a lot of conflict? Has this become the most important activity in your life? So you're not even prioritizing things like your own self-care, hygiene, eating, sleeping.
Hmm.
Is there a lot of binging behavior? So you're playing for 5+ hours, 3+ hours a day in a row. And then isolation, right? So does it seem like social, familial, intimate relationships are kind of falling by the wayside? So it's so much less about the number of hours. There's no magic number, and it's so much more about how is it affecting your life, and then what's the quality of the content that you're consuming.
Mm, okay.
Those are really the big ones.
Got you. Got you. And yeah, thank you for giving the resources that if people are concerned, they can go ahead and have a look. So when we come back, I am going to ask Alex for his healthy screen habit. Did you know that Healthy Screen Habits does workshops? For 2 days, we can come and guide students through an exploration of their own tech use and facilitate a research based presentation bespoke to their own questions. 87.5% of the teens who participated in this workshop recorded a change in their tech use following participation. For more information, contact us at info@healthyscreenhabits.org. We're back. I'm talking with Alex Basche, founder of ReSet from Tech, a mental health practice in Silicon Valley that treats people struggling with tech overuse. So, Alex, on every episode of the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, I ask each guest for a healthy screen habit. This is a tip or takeaway that our listeners can put into practice in their own home. Do you have one?
I do. So it may come as no surprise, but mine is related to the use of digital screens. So there's been plenty of research that shows that blue light, which is a form of light that we know is ample in the sun and also in our screens, that it suppresses melatonin production, and that's one of those sleep-inducing hormones that's pretty critical to our sleep quality and quantity. So What if there was a way to filter out the blue light from our screens? Well, some of you may know that there is. And what you can do basically is to look at your smartphone, your laptop, monitors, smart TVs. Most of these devices we use each day do have a way to do that, to filter out that blue light. So what you want to do is look at basically setting this up and seeing if there's a way to schedule it so that it goes off by around 7 or 8 p.m. each night. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to turn your device off. It just means that you enable that night mode, the blue light filter, whatever it might be called. And again, if you can schedule it automatically, then you don't even think about it. Anyone who's struggling with eye strain, digital eye strain, this will also reduce that too. So it's one of those things that's really easy to do, doesn't cost you anything, and will just kind of make your quality of life a lot better.
As always, you can find a complete transcript of this show and a link to the Reset from Tech website by going to healthyscreenhabits.org. Click the podcast button and scroll down to find this episode. Alex, thank you so much for sharing a fraction of what you know. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Hillary. I appreciate the chance to talk to you today.
For more information, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Healthy Screen Habits. Make sure to visit our website, healthyscreenhabits.org, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. It's free, it's fun, and you get a healthy new screen habit each week. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate you giving us a quick rating. It really does help other people find us and spread the word of healthy screen habits. Or if you'd simply like to tell a friend, we'd love that too. I so appreciate you spending your time with me this week, and I look forward to learning more healthy habits together.